describe each one of these very impressive women to you before they take the stage. Ellen McKnight, she was here last year. She is a rheumatologist from Pensacola, and she gave an incredible talk last year, which if you can get to the archives from Docs for Patient Care, which are available to everybody for free. I highly encourage you to access that, and I'm sure the talk she's going to give this year will be even better. Meg Edison is pediatrician from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Meg is a leader in fighting for different things. We pick a cause and she'll fight for it, but maintenance and certification is really, I think, one of her major areas of interest, and she has taken on the Goliaths and won. And then Kris, who is an ophthalmologist in San Antonio, Texas, who is now the president of the AAPS, and will have a lot to tell you about them and what they're doing. But you know, some of these people I have been working with from, I remember when we all started and we were just marching on Washington wearing our white coats, and look where they are now, some of the most impressive, powerful women in healthcare advocacy in the country. So without any further ado, let's start the panel, and let me introduce Elaina George.
Thank you, Hal. Thank you to all of the founders, the board directors of Doctors of Patient Care for having me come, and thank you to all the guests who actually are leaders and part of a movement. I'm here to talk about understanding how to be the doctor you wanted to be, but I want to start with a story because I think it's very instructive. I saw a patient a couple of weeks ago who during the history told me that she was end-stage renal failure and on dialysis. And it turned out that she was a hypertensive who couldn't afford her medication, and one of the side effects, or the outcome of it, was to end up on dialysis. I think that's one of the reasons, or how we can understand why we're all here today and why we're physicians. It's to be an advocate for our patients. And I really feel bad for the doctors who had to take care of her in this healthcare system where they couldn't advocate for her, where they couldn't get the medication that she actually needed, and it affected her entire life. So when you're sitting here and you've taken time out of your practice, you're part of us. We're part of the movement. It's us that's going to make the difference. It's not going to be Washington. It's not going to be our Congress people. It's going to be us, because we're on the front line. And one of the things I think people need to realize is that we have a tremendous amount of power, and we've ceded it to insurance companies, to hospitals, to people who don't have the best interests of our patients in mind. We do. And as long as we are polite and kind, sometimes fearful, then they're going to win. And that's one of the reasons that we're all sitting here on this dais, is because we decided we didn't want to play that game, because it was important to us. We were put on this earth for a reason, and that reason is to take care of our patients. I am so blessed that I'm able to get up in the morning and see patients and know that I'm doing what I was put on this earth to do. I enjoy what I do. I love what I do. And I have no interest in a third party, some outside player telling me my worth. And that's the first thing I think people need to really understand. You have to look inside yourself and figure out that you're worthy. I actually had to do it myself. I told the story about being in Florida years ago and having to make a decision about whether I wanted to still be in practice or whether I was going to fight. And a lot of tears, a lot of soul searching, and I finally made that decision, and I've never looked back. And you know, we're sitting here as leaders, but we started where you are. And it grows when you decide that you're worthy, that you're not going to take what they tell you you're supposed to take, that you're not worth, or your patient isn't worth being an advocate for. When you make the decision of I'm not going to play the game, it becomes actually very easy. You're not going to take certain insurances because they inhibit you from taking care of your patient. Maybe you don't want to add extenders to your practice because you want to be the front line of care. Maybe you want to disengage from the hospitals because you're tired of being a pawn in their game, and you're not interested in running afoul of them and ending up in sham peer review. All of these things that we put up with because our hearts are in the right place. But I don't think we give ourselves permission to take our power back, because when we do, then our patients become empowered. Then this system stops playing the game. They cannot use this system. It will not work unless we're part of it. I think we've probably seeded some of that with thinking that, you know, a nurse practitioner, physician assistants are equal as providers. But again, we're not providers, we're doctors. We did not spend all this time give yourself a round of applause. How many sleepless nights? How many nights on call? How many vacations missed? How much time with your family have you missed in order to take care of your patients? And somebody from on high, well, although they think they are, is going to come into the exam room and tell you, you need to do it differently. You need to be a data management resource. You know, all these things they're making us do. Just don't do it, you know? Stop. You know, the biggest thing that I did in my practice is that I examined what my day was like. You know, if you're seeing 50, 60 patients a day, which fortunately I never had to do, because when I left my residency, I joined a huge ENT practice, and after 3 years, I realized this is not for me, and I opened my own practice, and I've been a solo ENT physician for 18 years. That's a lot of time on the front line, and I've had to make it work. And part of that making it work was really being an entrepreneur, as Dr. Scherz said, where it's an art, it's a calling, but it's also a business. And that's what you guys are here to learn. And I'm just so impressed and honored to be in your presence, because it takes guts, it takes courage to think outside the box, to step out, supposedly on a limb, but when you're out here, you realize, geez, why didn't I do it sooner? I mean, I get to control my own destiny. I get to pick the times that I want to work. I get to take an hour if I want to with my patient. I'm on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't get calls from my patients, because when I'm in the room with them, we're speaking with each other face to face. No computer interface between us. No extender being the front line and me coming in and signing a chart. That's the standard of healthcare that we are able to provide. And as we just heard, patients are looking for that. This is the best time to be a physician. This is awesome. You know, when the Affordable Care Act passed, we didn't know, well, I knew. I think Dr. Scherz knew. We all knew it was going to be horrible. But the patients didn't know. But now they do. With $5,000 out of pockets and $10,000 deductibles, they sure as heck know what's going on now. And they're looking for an option. They're looking for a physician that can be their partner. This is an awesome time to step outside the box, because you will have patients beating down your door to see you. They don't want 7-minute medicine. They don't want somebody to come and write a prescription and walk out the door. They don't want to be signed up for surgery that they may or may not need. This is about human interaction, about quality interaction. It's not quantity, guys, it's quality. This is what you're here to provide, and patients will find you. I wouldn't be in practice for 18 years. I wouldn't be thriving at this point if I didn't realize, or I think have a sensitivity to not only what I wanted to offer, but what my patients were asking for. They're asking for our time. That's the number one thing that patients want. And we want the time so that we can actually care for our patients. And if we're able to do that and meet them right in that middle, that's the sweet spot. That's the part where we can actually affect the quality of medicine. No patient is going to want single-payer medical services if they know they can have a doctor that they can pick up a phone and call, that will care for them, that knows their name, that knows little idiosyncrasies about them, as opposed to a conveyor belt-driven medicine driven by algorithms and AI. Which one do you think a patient's going to choose? It's pretty easy. And when we tip that balance, where as physicians we stop saying, okay, we'll do it, we'll do more, we'll work harder, we'll try to make, we need to stop that. That's what got us into trouble in the first place, is being agreeable. Let's be disagreeable for a change. How about that? Being disagreeable means that you have energy, that you feel good about yourself. I mean, our profession is under siege. We all know that. We've heard the stories of our profession being the #1 with suicide rate. That's outrageous. Somebody who's empathetic, who cares, who gives 24/7, thinking that they're not worthy and they're going to hurt themselves. I mean, think about how sick that is, really. We cannot care for our patients unless we care for ourselves. And one of the things I think, at least that drives me, and I'm sure I'm speaking to, if not all of you, a majority, providing care in a way that's taking care of the patient is what we'd actually went to medical school, spent all our time doing. It's about health care, but the patient's health and our health. So, I mean, I don't have a lot more to say except I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for taking your time. We're resources for you. We're on the front line, but you're right there with us. All you have to do is take that step out on faith, and you will not look back. You'll wake up in the morning like you did when you were hopeful about being a physician and say, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do something good today. I'm going to make a difference for my patient. I'm going to add something positive to this healthcare debate. Lord knows we're needed. And we have all these people telling us how we should be, what healthcare should be. It's time we stood up and said, enough. We're not listening to you. And as physicians, we get to determine our worth, our future of our profession, and exactly how we think healthcare should be delivered. And with that, I want to end, and I look forward to taking any questions. And again, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, that was inspiring, and Dr. George is someone who leads by example. I don't know if anybody saw the executive order signing at the White House, where direct primary care was a big part of that executive order, and Dr. George and Dr. Lee Gross were up there, and that's what this organization is all about, being able to influence people to be able to see the things that are important to everyone in this room, and that's why it's so important to really be behind this organization and really and step up and become a leader, like Dr. George and like all these other women on this panel who you'll hear from. And next we'll hear from Ellen McKnight, and looking forward to her talk, which is going to be on empowering physicians to change leaders. Ellen?
Thank you so much for inviting me to be back with you again this year. Last year when I stood before you, I mentioned that it was very energizing to be in a room of what I'm going to call happy warriors. That's what I said last time. When I was at this meeting last year, I was infused with an energy that literally carried me all year. This is a meeting of physicians who are dedicated to reclaiming medicine, and it's so inspiring to be amongst all of you. I would also like to thank Dr. Lee Gross and the boards of the Physicians Foundation, Doctors for Patient Care, and the DPC Action for again inviting me to be with you. William Shakespeare said, "This above all, to thine own self be true." If Shakespeare were to write a play about the demise of the great and noble profession of medicine, would he compose a tragedy or a comedy? As I have thought about this question, I have decided it could go either way. Shakespearean plays often feature characters disguising themselves as something they are not, usually in the form of hidden or mistaken identities. In Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, the star-crossed lovers are in disguise as they first meet at a grand masquerade party. Throughout the play, they are never permitted to be transparent about who they truly are, and their relationship must remain a secret. They are conflicted between loyalty to family and love of each other. The consequences, though, of this continued secrecy is their ultimate tragic demise. The art of the masquerade is center stage in medicine today. Physicians are being encouraged to play along with this game of identity charades. The rules of this game do not allow us to be fully transparent about who we are and what we do. In fact, our knowledge, skill, and experience is to be minimized, if not overtly denigrated. Physicians are no longer to be respected, revered, or even thanked, for that matter, but instead to be labeled as beleaguered, discontent, and burned out. We are expected to turn a blind eye to the legions of masqueraders, emphatically proclaiming their relevance as we are being told we can and will be replaced. We are pressured to acquiesce to the ultimate masquerade, where non-physicians are dressed up, donning the white coat, wearing the guise of doctor, and we are dressed down as merely providers. This recasting of our roles works to the benefit of administrators and bureaucrats as they continually churn the employment mills of healthcare delivery. The physician workers are often conflicted between their contractual duty to their employer and loyalty to their patients and profession. Healthcare today has been transformed into an assembly line of workers who are sanctioned by government to promote secrecy in all aspects of production. For instance, healthcare workers today dutifully gather and then transfer private medical information, so-called data, to third parties without the patient's knowledge or consent. This data collection is rewarded with bonuses by Medicare and third parties, which serves to propagate the conditioned response of conformity. Pavlov would be very impressed because even if these physicians are not rewarded with bonuses, they continue to perform as though they were. But the profession of medicine can no longer allow for secrecy or for masqueraders. Patients are deceived by those in medicine who prefer their identities to remain hidden, and this deception can have dire consequences. There are many elaborately adorned actors in medicine today, wearing the mask of patient, protector, and advocate. Pharmacy benefit managers claim to protect patients as their policies make insulin $500 a month, and diabetics are forced to leave their pharmacies without this life-saving medication. Politicians and bureaucrats devise and then pass laws that make the delivery of care much more expensive, non-transparent, and more difficult to access, as they claim their goal is to protect patients. An increasing number of non-physicians are portraying themselves as the authentic patient guardians as they sloganeer the platitude, mind of a doctor, heart of a nurse. Omnipresent lawyers claim they must protect patients who have been injured, but in doing so have created a malpractice system which is a cornucopia of frivolous claims. These attorneys reap a harvest of riches, reserving the lion's share of the financial reward for themselves. Insurance companies, whose very existence is predicated on protecting patients from extreme financial harm, have devised a convoluted scheme of networks and deductibles, which entraps patients into paying as much for their health insurance as they do for their mortgage. Insurance companies project a facade that their product gives true financial coverage and protection when they have made it impossible for most patients to utilize their product. Instead of seeing the facade, patients see a mirage of true protection. The illusion is that they have excellent Cadillac coverage, yet they pay enormous sums of money only to be denied services when needed. This Cadillac has turned out to be a money-guzzling junker for most Americans, and patients are not being protected, as is claimed, from financial ruin. I believe it is our duty to attempt to lay bare the secrets of those who offer only illusions and facades. Our patients are often unable to see through the disguise of these actors, and because of this, their actions go unchallenged. But this secrecy and deception is not only affecting our patients, it is affecting our colleagues and our profession. A bitter season of deep discontent has settled in over our beloved profession. This discontentment is being termed burnout, although Shakespeare may have described it as the winter of our discontent. I would like us to consider that burnout may be more of a season in medicine. These dreary conditions besetting our profession can change, like winter becoming spring. Burnout was not prevalent when my father and father-in-law were practicing, although they worked extremely hard. However, they were in control of their own professional fate. The profession of medicine, like all professions, have a subset within their ranks who suffer from major depression and other mental illness. If we examined everyone employed in what I'm going to call the medical administrative state, including hospital administrators, health IT executives, health insurance CEOs, and CMS bureaucrats, they too would have a subset of individuals who are depressed, have anxiety, and are dissatisfied with their job situation. So physicians are not unique in that some of us have also experienced these more serious problems. In his presentation, Broken Doctors, Broken Systems, Dr. Eric Levy points out that physician burnout appears to be more of a psychological phase, usually related to workplace stress, thereby having the potential to be modified, changed, and ultimately rectified. It is not a DSM-5 mental illness diagnosis, and we must not allow others, inside or outside of the House of Medicine, to conflate it as such. As we have all witnessed, physicians often put their own needs, patients' needs, before their own. Even those doctors who are suffering personal and professional angst exhibit a diligence in assuring that the care of the patient does not suffer, even if they are. But if physicians do not put forth a serious effort to heal ourselves, I worry about what may happen. I have concerns about the increased medical legal implications of burnout. I worry that the masqueraders in medicine may use this against us by implying that fault is not with them. For instance, they will never concede that the use of the junky, clunky EHR has increased the rates of medical errors, but they may attempt to shift the fault to all those so-called burned-out doctors. I have real concerns about government, i.e. politicians, at some point deciding they need to solve this physician burnout issue by giving us what? More mandates and metrics to prove we are truly well. There exists a powerful potion, however, which could be the antidote to our discontentment, but it will require us to drink from the cup of physician autonomy. The key is for doctors to once again become the sole determiners of their professional fate. Just look to the physicians here today who have gleefully imbibed the intoxicant of physician autonomy. There is no burnout, and there is no discontentment. There is, though, a true love of this model of direct care, so much so that they are committed to share every aspect of it with you this weekend. That harkens back to a different time in medicine where doctors shared all things as collegial members of our great learned profession. That mindset differs significantly from the hyper-competitive model that predominates in medicine today. This hyper-competitive model is stoked by the medical administrative state in hopes of keeping us dormant, too weak to mount a meaningful response to their assaults on our profession, especially a response which would foster physician independence. Just being at this conference geared towards physician autonomy and patient protection would be considered by many in the administrative state to be disruptive. The term disruptive physician no longer refers to a physician who exhibits disturbing, unethical behavior. The term disruptive physician now means you and me and all of our independent colleagues. But what is the behavior that defines a so-called disruptive physician in medicine today? Would physicians be labeled as disruptive if we encroached upon the turf of the profiteers and corporatists, demanding price transparency for our patients and freedom from the indentured servitude to the EHR for ourselves? Would physicians be labeled as disruptive if we supported current legal action against the boards and showed up in legislatures around this country to demand that we be protected from the extortion racket called maintenance of certification? Would physicians be disruptive if we decided medicine is worth saving and stood against the things which denigrate our profession? But how would Shakespeare portray our physician disruptor? The one who would need to find the courage to be the unmasker and the revealer. See if any of these physician phenotypes sound familiar. Maybe you have encountered doctors like this, and maybe I was once a doctor like this. And I use he because all Shakespearean actors were men, even if they portrayed women. What a dreadful thing when you think about it. He might be portrayed as a hapless conformist who willingly complies with every rule or regulation that has ever been proposed, no matter how cumbersome or worthless. He is so busy trying for his MIPS bonus that he doesn't realize there is a better way, and because of his oblivion, the profession fades away. Maybe he is a doctor who is so weakened by the dictates of the administrative overlords that he has been rendered powerless to rise out of his dormant state. He knows something is wrong and claims to want a different path for his practice and his professional life, but he's just too afraid to act, and because of his fear, the profession is lost. Perhaps he would be a tragic figure who is desperately trying to save the profession, yet time and time again, he is thwarted and ultimately betrayed by saboteurs who purport to be his colleague and claim to be his ally. My hope is he would be an independent, direct primary care doctor, one who has said, forget you to insurance companies, who has said, forget you to Medicare, and who has said, forget you to mega corporate pharmacies, but who has not forgotten his patients or his calling. The natural result of this direct relationship would be the revealing of those who were never necessary, but whose interference was allowed because they masqueraded as though they were. Perhaps the most famous soliloquy in all of Shakespeare's writings begins, to be or not to be. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. Physicians in this country have thought it noble to suffer and endure the slings and arrows aimed at our profession. Many doctors have thought it beneath them to speak out and fight back against the things which denigrate our profession. This has resulted in the outrageous fortune which has befallen medicine. These outrages include our doctors' orders being promptly ignored the moment they are written, and our indentured labor to health IT doing 4 to 6 weeks of uncompensated work a year. This outrageous fortune also includes laws which prohibit physicians from making a fair profit, but encourage the masqueraders to use our skills to profiteer off of our patients. It is truly outrageous when insurance companies, mega-corporate pharmacies, and so-called non-profit hospitals cunningly disguise their overpriced services as being benefits they provide to the patients. Politicians and administrators have allowed for the encroachment of individuals into our learned profession who have not acquired the extensive knowledge and skill that has been the standard for our profession. It is troubling that within this group of non-physicians, there is a growing chorus of individuals gallingly claiming that all that medical training doesn't really matter. Now that's truly outrageous. Should we continue to suffer the slings and arrows wielded by those who add nothing to the practice of medicine? These slings and arrows which continually increase the heights of the hurdles we must clear in order to get our patients what they need. Must we continue to endure the slings and arrows of regulations and rules placed on us by interferers who greatly increase the cost of health care, not by adding value, but by skimming off a sizable portion for themselves? Should we continue to support our specialty societies, societies who claim to be our shield against the unending barrage from the medical administrative state? Yet these same societies usually give up the fight when the incoming fire gets too intense, the political pressure builds, or their monetary interests are threatened. These bureaucratic bastions of organized medicine predictably acquiesce as they sheepishly acknowledge that they really are only capable of, quote, minimizing the damage. The damage, however, is never minimal. Our support should go to fearless, physician-centric organizations like Doctors for Patient Care and DPC Action. Or should we take arms against a sea of troubles? Physicians have a formidable armamentarium, an intellectual and knowledge-based arsenal that is fortified by our Hippocratic oath, which, once taken, forever places us as the true patient protectors. Our knowledge, skill, and experience forms our weaponry as we take arms against this sea of troubles. There is a truism about we physicians that often gets lost as we attempt to navigate these turbulent seas. It is the physician who possesses the knowledge. It is the physician who has the skill. That knowledge and skill is always with you. So where you go, it goes. It does not stay behind if you decide to get out of a situation which forces you to do things counter to your oath. All of your knowledge, your skill, and now your experience is yours, and it has enormous value. There is immense power in knowing that nothing in medicine can be done without us, and it is our knowledge and skill and training that makes that so. And by opposing, end them. Can we end these things by opposing them? If we begin to say the simple but very powerful word no, would that end the slings and arrows? If we said we're physicians and we don't do it that way to the outlandish regulations and perverse incentives of Medicare and insurance companies, would that change our outrageous fortune? If we commit to boldly promote the knowledge and skills of MDs and DOs, not to denigrate, but to educate? Would we end the masquerade party? If we rose out of our dormant state to become defenders of the profession, would we project our real strength to all of those who dare to masquerade and interfere? Yes, I believe we would, but as individual doctors, above all, we must be true to ourselves. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus wrote, "We learn about ourselves taking one footstep at a time down a road of discovery. In searching for the truth, be ready for the unexpected." Our road of discovery must lead us to a place where physicians once again become the sole determiners of our professional fate, completely in charge of how our knowledge and skill will be used. And that can only be done by reclaiming our autonomy. Together, as a community, physicians must commit to stand in opposition to all that denigrates our profession. If we do what is right for the profession of medicine, everything else follows. Therefore, let us ask ourselves, to be or not to be, bold and unafraid, to be or not to be a defender of the profession, to be or not to be, that is the question. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
That was wonderful, Ellen. I got to spend less time watching SportsCenter and reading Shakespeare instead. You know, I'm a disruptive physician, and each and every one of you here today are disruptive physicians too, because you're doing something that the mainstream medical societies don't want you to do, which is to buck the system and swim upstream. So you just need to understand that going in. I was hoping that this doctor was going to be here today. Ellen had a lot of powerful messages in her talk. There's a book that a friend of ours wrote that I highly recommend, and you should write this down and you should get it. It's called The Price We Pay, and it's by Marty McCary. And it is going to piss you off because he really unpacks a lot of what Ellen said in her talk, and it's spot on. And even if you think you know a lot about the challenges and issues that we are facing, this book will teach you something. It certainly taught me some things that I thought I knew that I didn't. So our next speaker is Meg Edison, who's going to tell you how to fight back against the man.
So I'm a pediatrician, and we always have a little bit of an academic inferiority complex. So when they asked me to give a talk, I was like, I'm totally doing a PowerPoint because I'm going to be legit.
There we go. Just hit that.
All right,
Okay.
Go back like that.
Yeah. Go back.
And how do I go forward? That?
Back,
All right. And also, I had an ulterior motive, because if I don't have slides, then you get to have a close-up video of my face on that screen. So that's why I went for the slides. I have known Hal and Lee and Ori and Mike and Beth and behind-the-scenes people, Felicia and Bob, for a while now. So I think we actually, and Kris too, we met in person probably spring of 2011, Doctors of Patient Care, at a conference in DC that I attended. And I think that was probably the first time that Lee had ever given an actual public talk on what they were doing at Epiphany. He didn't have the name Direct Primary Care at that time. I think it was known in some of the Sermo underground as the Lee Gross / Sandyfoot plan. And I remember getting to that conference, and he was up there, and I'm not a big fan of speaking in public, so I can recognize this in other people. And I remember looking up on the podium, and I could see that Lee was in agony. This was just not something he enjoyed doing. And I was like, man, I have got to pay attention to what this guy is going to say, because he is putting himself through significant physical pain to bring this message to us. And there was a physician there, a surgeon from the Upper Peninsula, Dick Armstrong, who had invited me to come to DC. And he leaned over to me and he was like, pay attention, Meg, because what these guys are doing, this is going to change everything. And he was right. what you guys are doing, that has changed everything. The rest of that meeting was a complete blur for me. I mean, I had healthcare policy thrown at me. We were up on the hill in white coats. I'm a pediatrician, so I had to actually go buy a white coat to go up on the hill. And you know, so you're in these rooms with these senators and these congressmen, these famous people you only saw on TV. It was very, very, very overwhelming, and I don't think anyone that was at that meeting left unchanged. There's a picture out there with all the doctors in their white coats in front of the Capitol. I'm not in that picture because I was with about 20 other doctors on the other side of the Capitol looking for everyone. So that just shows you how much I didn't know about the system at that time. I should take that picture, our selfie, and just like stick it up there because we were there. Anyway, what I think is fascinating is how all of us left that place, and we just had to figure out where our niche was. We just really motivated to make medicine better for physicians and patients, and how we were going to do that. So for some people, that niche ended up looking like this. For some of us, that niche ended up looking like this. For me, when I left DC that time, I was just trying to figure out what am I going to do. And I was like, get real, Meg. I'm a small-town pediatrician, private practice in the Midwest. There was just no way. I had 3 small kids. I'm like, there's no way I can be jet-setting off to DC all the time. Whatever I do, I've got to figure out a way to make it work for my budget and for my family, and it's probably going to have to be local. I was also really mad at a lot of people around that time. I was mad at politicians for passing a bill they had no business passing without any understanding of what they were doing. I was mad at the next group of politicians who got in there because they didn't seem to understand anything else. They didn't have the will or actually know how to fix what was going wrong. I was mad at organized medicine. I was really mad at the AMA. And what I realized as I was in these policy meetings, I understood medicine, I understood the business of medicine. I didn't understand the politics at all. I didn't understand any of the system, and I was really actually mad at myself for that happening, that I assumed that there was somebody that was kind of watching my back, and that ended up not being the case. And so I left there realizing I have got to figure this system out. And I guess I'm going to show you kind of where I was at that point. I want anybody who knows who their senators are to raise your hand. Now, I'm not going to be judgy because at the time Obamacare was passed, if it had been a multiple choice, I probably could have figured out who my senators were, but if it were fill in the blank, I probably couldn't have. So hands up if you know who your senators are. All right, if you know who your congressman is, hands up. If you know who your state senator is, hands up. If you know who your state representative is, yeah. So this is what I found crazy, is the people that you have like the least amount of influence on, who really don't care what you have to say, are the people that you know who they are. The people that you actually have the most influence on, your state representative, the person who actually really wants to hear what you have to say, you don't even know their name. And that was pretty messed up to me, and I was determined to figure out how to work that. So I had a little crash course on state legislature, and I can't tell you how little I knew. So I just called up my state representative, had to figure out who it was, and when you call, you don't actually get your state representative, which I was really thankful for. You get a young person, and it happened to be a young person from the district who actually had been a patient in our practice many years before. So I pimped that kid for information. I was like, you have got to tell me everything, because I know nothing. And when you say that to these young people, they will tell you everything. I didn't know there's full-time legislatures and part-time legislatures. In Michigan, unfortunately, Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, and California, we are full-time legislature. That means they're always there causing mischief. You have to pay attention. I didn't know how long these people serve for. I didn't know what term limits were. They told me all this stuff. When they write these bills, they go to something called a health policy committee. Those are totally open for you to go to. There are ways for you to track the legislation that's coming in your state. You can sign up for little alerts. You can sign up for alerts when they come into the health policy committee. You can just go and testify if you want. You can write a letter, and they'll put it in the testimony. I mean, I knew none of this stuff. And they told me that there were physician lawmakers, and I was like, what? I had no idea why a physician would want to be a lawmaker. I still have no idea. It sounds like a miserable job. But I figured out who they were, and I contacted them, and I was like, I want to be a resource. I want to be involved in some way. So I had followed this stuff for a while, and there was enough coming down from the feds with the ACA that was going to affect the states that I figured, all right, I can get involved at the state level. And the first thing that came through were the Obamacare exchanges. And I had learned enough when I was in DC that economically it was better if the state did not set up an exchange and if the feds were allowed to do it. And so I was like, I know this. So I went out and I wrote op-eds, I gave talks, I got physicians to come and testify in committee, got people to come from, grassroots people to come to the Capitol and talk with their lawmakers about this, and it worked. We ended up not setting up a state exchange. And I was like, wow, that was pretty cool. So the next thing that came up was Medicaid expansion in our state. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do the same thing. Write op-eds, I'm going to go and talk to people. Actually, I got some doctors and we put together a conference where we had Ovik Roy from Forbes come in and talk about Medicaid expansion to a group of lawmakers and physicians. We had Seema Verma, before she was Seema Verma of CMS. She came to Michigan and talked about the Healthy Indiana Plan. And then we went to the Capitol and talked to our lawmakers. And I got out of about a 30-minute talk with my state representative on not expanding Medicaid in the state and just the fiscal issues with that. And I came out, and there were the chief lobbyist and the legislative director of my state medical society. And I was like, hey, Colin. I knew them because I had testified against them in a few committees. And I was like, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, hey, we're going to go talk to your representative about expanding Medicaid. And I was like, I just got done talking to them about not expanding Medicaid. What's going on here? And they just shrugged at me, and they're like, well, it's medical society policy. And I left there, and I was like, what dark magic is this? What do you mean policy? Who makes up policy? Is this behind closed doors, a smoky room? What is this, right? And it ended out that Michigan expanded Medicaid. And I sat there going, man, I am missing something. I can know all about the legislative process, but if I ignore my state medical society, I am going to fail. I am just one person, the medical society. Even if I say I feel like they don't represent me, in the eyes of the state lawmakers, they represent you. And so I realized I got to figure this out. So I talked to a bunch of doctors. I was like, should I get involved in organized medicine? And they're like, no, don't get involved. It's a waste of time. It's just it's a good old boys club. Don't do it. And everyone said, don't do it. And that was when my community-acquired oppositional defiant disorder kicked in. And when you tell me no, you all know what that is, right? When you tell me no, I gotta do it, right? So I just jumped in both feet, and I learned about what a state medical society is. Many people don't probably know what this is. And so there are actually 50 unique state medical societies, and 40 of them have an annual House of Delegates meeting. And I learned that the policymaking process is not behind closed doors. It is the most democratic, open process I have ever seen. Basically, you write a policy resolution, they go and they debate it at the House of Delegates, they vote on it, and then it becomes policy. You write your resolution in the right way, and it can change the legislative priorities of your medical society. All of your state medical societies send delegates to the AMA. So if there's something that you want taken to the AMA, that's how you do it. I've actually had 4 resolutions taken to the AMA. One actually became policy on MOC, and they didn't even amend it. It's like my policy. You go to the AMA policy and MOC, that's my language right there. I mean, it's crazy. Whether they do anything with it, that's another story. But that's how this process works. But most importantly, your state medical society is the voice of physicians to your state lawmaker, more so than your specialty society, your state specialty society, more than the AMA. The lawmakers are listening to what the state medical society has to say. So now you're like, well, what was it like getting involved in this process? And it was exactly what I was told. It is a good old boys club, in the best sense of the word. So first off, I was expecting ogres when I was going to join the society, and it turns out they're really good people. This is a thankless job, going and sitting on these committees and spending this time, and these are physicians who truly care about our profession and about patients. We may disagree on the means to get to the end, but we all have the same goals in mind. They are mostly boys. I don't know why that is. It's mostly guys involved in organized medicine. That is no reason for women to not get involved. I found that in leadership positions, they're more likely to put women in leadership positions because there are just so few of us involved. So if you're a woman out there thinking of doing it, just get involved. It's a club, but it's not an elite club. This is your club. These societies are designed for you. And they've been around a long time. So in Michigan, ours has been around 150 years. I think Florida, 150 years. Texas, I'm pretty sure yours has been around since before the discovery of germ theory, which furthers my belief that's why Texas exists, to make us all feel inferior, right? The point is, these are organizations that have been around for generations of physicians, have built these organizations to be there for you at this time. And in your state, there are no other organizations who are going to stand up for you. The hospitals aren't, the insurance companies aren't. It's going to be your state medical society. And this is a club that is for you, so don't feel like it's something you can't get involved in. This is for you. And me, I was a serious thorn in my medical society's side for a very long time before I got involved, and they welcomed me in. It wasn't like someone shut this lady up. It was like, how do we get her involved? So this is something for all of you. This society is old. There are mostly old people in there. I am 45. I've been doing this in the society for 6 years, and I am still the youngest person in the room. You might think of that as being a negative. I have found that to be an incredible positive, because the opportunities for physicians right now in organized medicine, stuff you can get involved in right now, you used to have to wait a long time to be able to get in those positions. My first year as a medical society member, I was a delegate to our House of Delegates. The next year I was on a committee. The next year after that I was chairing a committee. I mean, within like a few months of me becoming a medical society member, I was on the board of my county medical society, and now I'm the president of my county medical society. This stuff can move very fast, and you can get involved very easily. For example, in Michigan, over half of our state delegate spots go totally unclaimed. So if you're in a county where there are no delegates that have decided to go, you can just say, I want to be a delegate, and you can go. 2/3 of our county medical societies are defunct, which means you can revive them. Belinda Mott in Michigan, she's actually reviving the Berry County Medical Society. You know, she just called up and said, I'd like to start the medical society, and they're like, awesome. And she's like, I'd like to be the president. There you go. I mean, it's amazing what you can do. So, so I've already approached many doctors here from Michigan that we've got to get you involved. You can just jump into those spots. So, let's go forward. All right, so when you know how the state legislative process works and you're involved in your state medical society and you bring those two things together, that is where the magic happens. And so in Michigan, the case study of what happened with our direct primary care legislation, it illustrates this so well. So at that same meeting, we had Seema Verma and Ovik Roy. Lee Gross was there giving another talk on direct primary care, and he was so polished by that point. He was awesome. He knew what he was doing. He was very comfortable in front of the audience. And in the audience, there was a lawmaker, a new state senator, Pat Colbeck, and he heard Lee's talk, and he was on fire. He was like, I am going to pass DPC legislation in Michigan. And he was going to do it. And I was like, great, how can I help? And he was like, well, can you make sure the medical society is on board? And I'm like, sure. I had no idea how to do that. So I called up my friend Ken Fisher, who is my mentor. He had been a past president of the medical society. I was like, how are we going to do this? He said, well, we're going to write a resolution. So we wrote a resolution. It was going to the House of Delegates, and I was actually on the committee where it was going to come into my committee. I was like, this is going to be cake, no problem, right? So we get to the House of Delegates, and I'm listening to this, and there actually was another resolution they were going to be discussing to actually kind of work to outlaw what they were calling concierge medicine, but it would have also affected direct primary care practices. And then everyone started testifying on the direct primary care resolution we had written, and it was all opposition. And I'm watching this go down. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to go down in flames, right? So I'm on this committee. I can't say anything, but I texted my friend Ken. I'm like, you've got to get over here, and you need to explain what direct primary care is to these people. And Ken came over, and he did it. He explained to this committee exactly what was going on, what direct primary care was. And then in the committee, I got to do the same thing, explain exactly what was going on and why we needed this legislation passed in Michigan. And it passed out of committee. The medical society voted on it, became policy. When Pat came to get his legislation passed, the medical society was totally on board, no question. And that was amazing to me. When I think about what the alternative could have been, if we had not been there judging by the tone in that room, we probably would have we wouldn't have supported direct primary care. The medical society probably would have opposed direct primary care, which would have been disastrous. And that's where, this is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. That was never more obvious to me than at that moment, that if we hadn't been in that room to explain to people what was going on, we would have not had that outcome. All right. I put this slide in every talk I give because I am on an anti-burping campaign, so you do not need to burp a baby. They are not going to explode. They have a hole at the top and a hole at the bottom, and the gas is going to get out. Okay, they have studied this in 2014. They had a cohort of burping babies and not burping babies, and they looked at colic and fussiness, and it is the exact same, whether you burp or don't burp your baby. And actually, they found that the burping cohort spit up twice as much as a non-burping cohort. So there you go. That's your public service announcement from your friendly neighborhood pediatrician. All right. So I'm going to skip through these next slides really quick here. Am I? Oh, all right, so here we go. So for those of you now, you're like, well, what do I do if I get involved? What can I do at my state level? I actually came up with some options here for what you can get involved in. Phil Eskew helped me out with this. Yeah, you guys can see it. All right, so the first stuff is direct primary. Where I would go if you're looking at this, the DPC Frontier website is amazing. You can go learn about all these issues. You can click on a state and see where your state stands on these issues. But the first one, obviously, is DPC is not insurance law. If your state hasn't passed something like that, you got to do it. Really, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, if you're going to go to your medical society, we've already written the resolution. The laws are out there. Phil says the Wyoming legislation is his favorite in terms of the language. Physician dispensing rights, not affecting many people, but Texas hasn't quite figured this one out yet. And I feel bad for Texas, but Michigan never beats Texas in anything. And this is one of those things where Michigan has beat Texas. I think you guys are you're gonna figure it out eventually, right? Pathology billing rights. There are now 18 states where you just can't contract with pathology. There were 19 states. And so this means this can be changed, because in Kansas, they changed it to being illegal to not illegal, and that was done by Josh and Ryan. If you go to the language in the legislature, they are as testimony from those two guys and their state medical society made it happen. And if those two guys can make it happen in their state, you guys can make it happen in your state. Lab billing rights, another thing you can work on. Medicaid contracting rights, Colorado and Kentucky, you guys are not able to do that. You need to work on getting that switched around. DPC pilot programs for state employees and Medicaid, get working on that. Oklahoma has some fantastic language, and if they don't murder it in committee, it's going to be really, really awesome for what they can do. Whatever you do, don't look at Michigan's pilot program at all. It's like the worst language on earth. It's run through an insurance company, and the insurance company, you're kind of this pass-through physician, and you have to use in-network providers, and you have to do prior auths and use their formulary, and I'm like, that sounds not like direct primary care. And if you really want to tilt at windmills, you can take on certificate of need. If you can get you need to have more options for labs, more options for radiology, more surgical centers to bring down the cost for our patients. MOC, if you want to take on a beast, that's another one. If you're not using insurance, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. But there are many states where you could be, you're not allowed to call yourself a board-certified physician or a specialist if you're not board-certified through specifically ABMS boards. And passing legislation to make sure you don't need to be doing MOC in order to get your medical license is also very, very important. All right, I'm going to skip through these. These are from Phil's website. You can go look at these, except to say Phil is a very soft-spoken person, but I'm telling you, he rocks the 80s neon in his graphics like no one else. They are amazing. So look, this is it. This is amazing. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about MOC briefly, but this, you don't need to know much here, but look at this, just to show what physician involvement can do. We didn't have any MOC laws just a few years ago, and the gray states are the ones where we don't have anything. Blue is where there's actually action happening, and this is 100% physicians getting involved and making this happen. Okay. So I'm going to get back to this picture here. So this was me finding my niche. This is Ned Canfield. He's a state representative for the state of Michigan, and this was taken last December. I had worked on MOC, getting a state law in my state to prevent it from being tied to licensed insurance providers in Michigan. I started working on it 6 years ago, writing a resolution in my medical society and following it through. And we had legislation that just kept on failing. And every dirty trick in the book you can imagine, from the American Board of Medical Specialties and the American Board of Pediatrics, were thrown at us. I had Blue Cross Blue Shield causing all sorts of havoc in my practice because I took on this issue. And this last fall, we had a changeover in our legislature. We were going to have a split government, a Democrat governor and a Republican legislature. And this guy here, he had had enough of politics, and he was like, I am out, you know? So he was going to be done. And I was sitting here going, all this work, 6 years of work is going to be just thrown down the drain. And I got myself organized, and I was like, all right, you know what, there's lame duck session. Let's see if we can get this done. And I asked all of these lawmakers, can we get it done on lame duck? I talked to the medical society, can we get it done on lame duck? And they all said no. And when everyone tells me no, I'm like, we have got to do this. So got my medical society on board, and we did. We pushed this through in lame duck so fast that the American Board of Medical Specialties were just caught flat-footed. They didn't even know what was happening. And so this is, it went to a committee, and in the committee hearing, it was the representative and I were up there just talking to the committee about it, and there were some representatives from the American Board of Medical Specialties and another board, and they were opposing it. And usually when they vote on things in a committee, they're going to go behind closed doors and vote. And the chair of the committee, and I'm telling you, to get it to that point, I cashed in all of my chips on everyone I had met over all those years. You know, if the kid that answered the phone was now the legislative director of someone else, I cashed them all in. I'm like, can we please get this passed? And the guy that was chairing the committee, he knew how much this mattered to me, and he called for a vote right there in front of ABMS and everyone in the room, and it was unanimous. And it was the coolest thing to say. So came out of the room, we took that picture, and then I went in my car and I cried for a long time. I was so happy. But that was my niche right there. It's not Rose Garden, it's not White House, but that's where I found I can make the most impact.
That was great. Meg is a rock star. You know, what she said is so true that, well, first of all, in Michigan, I think they all read Sun Tzu, which is keep your friends close, your enemies closer. They'd rather have her working in there than have her working outside so they could keep an eye on her. But you can all do the same thing. I mean, there are people in this room who've worked with their medical societies and their legislatures to get DPC, MOC, all the things that you heard Meg talk about. Lee Gross, Ori Hampel. I've done it in Georgia. This is not rocket science. It's just being a thorn in their side and a pain in the ass, and you can do it, and it's important. So I encourage everybody to take away from this that even one person can make a difference, because you really can. So finishing up our panel is Kris Held, who's going to talk about leadership again.
Well, thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate being here among this amazing group of physicians, and particularly these women who have inspired me and kept me from being demoralized. And thank you all in so many ways for so many things. But American Medicine 2020, lead it or lose it. And I'm going to just go through a lot of slides because I'm an ophthalmologist and very visual. If I was coming back again at a younger state, I think I would actually want to be a DPC, a true DPC primary care physician. Thanks, Dr. Gross, for having me and for speaking at our meeting. I really do appreciate it. I believe that we physicians have lost control of our profession, our patient safety, and our ability to freely practice patient-centered Hippocratic medicine in the United States. What we need is what we've got in here: bold leaders, humble servants, and champions of freedom. We're faced with growing individual debt, practice burdens, decreased reimbursement, national debt crisis, and barrage of third-party interlopers, and a conflict of vision. Can physicians remain physicians? We must stand, and we can take it back. And it's happening in this room with this group and these people. And the struggle for the soul of healthcare really goes back to the time of Hippocrates and Plato. Plato urged that doctors refrain from curing the weak and infirm to improve society, whereas we, Hippocratic physicians, in his vein and down his line, felt the physicians worked on behalf of the patient, not the good of the state. And so in everything I do, I ask myself, who do I serve? The patient or the state? And in this day and age, you have to ask yourself, who do you serve? Your employer, private equity, the hospital? The doctor's doctor, the most influential Hippocratic physician, was Sir William Osler, MD. And he passed 100 years ago, and hopefully his tradition won't. He called medicine an art, and he was so instrumental in laying hands on the patient, examining the patient, talking to the patient, going in the room. Here's my family of physicians. My father's a neurosurgeon, and my two daughters, one's a dermatologist, one's a resident. They both did internal medicine residencies, as did I. Because you're a doctor first, you're a physician first before you go out and specialize. My father always had a saying for his department of neurosurgery: honor tradition, serve the sick, and advance the field. And we have got to recruit team members to Team Hippocrates. Now here's when I talk about the conflict of vision. The influential physicians with the Affordable Care Act were those like Ezekiel Emanuel. And he did things like the Grim Reaper curve. And the thing that really impressed me in a negative fashion was this article in The Atlantic, and you should read it. Why I Hope to Die at 75. An argument to why you and your families should just let nature take its course. Very different vision that I have, and very different vision than my father has, very alert, active, and 88 years old. Dr. Emanuel was one of the key advisors on the Affordable Care Act, and he bemoaned that doctors take the Hippocratic Oath too seriously as an imperative to do everything for the patient. He felt that we need to redefine doctors' obligations. Medical students should be trained to provide socially sustainable, cost-effective care. And then there was Don Berwick, Obama's first head of CMS, and he believed that the federal government actually should step in between doctors and patients and curb and redistribute the use of medical resources. So this is pretty shocking. The impact of that philosophy on current healthcare policy cannot be overstated or underestimated. So who are we? Who do we serve? Will we honor our code of ethics? And how about that forgotten patient? You know, our founders knew about what was coming, and we had to fight to secure our blessings of liberty, and we need to do that every day. And the burden of debt is as destructive to freedom as subjugation by conquest. Our debt clock, our national debt clock, just hit $23 trillion. We're spending $3.2 trillion a year on quote-unquote health care. Is single payer the answer to this? No. It is really the mechanism by which we will lose our freedom. And one of the myths is that medical care is unaffordable. It's so expensive that if we don't have insurance, we can't get medical care. But we know that's true. The people in the room, we know how much the actual cost is, and we must address those underlying drivers. And if you get sick, you'll go bankrupt. That's another one. Well, we know about that. When I was a medical student way back when, and this is I stayed on faculty for a while at the med school, and this is one of my residents. She now has 3 physician children, and I was pregnant with my second physician daughter there. And the state needed doctors in Texas, so my tuition was $300. And when you added in the malpractice fee of $25 and health of $60, it came to $430 my senior year. Flash forward. My medical school in University of Texas Med School in San Antonio is one of the top 10 lowest in the country. But our even in-state tuition is $19,700 a year. But if you look across the country at public medical schools, in-state average $37,000, out-of-state $62,000, and immediate medical school debt is $194,000 when you get out. That's why 47.4 now of physicians are employed. You can't afford to go out and set up like we did in our communities and stay in our communities. We need to fix that. That needs to be an initiative. Here's one of my daughters who's when she was a resident, an intern, now she's an attending. She stayed on and wants to serve and help in the university before going out. And doctors are not tools of the hospital as it plays their cartel game, but that's how they're using medical students and residents these days. Interns are not going on rounds or staying home and doing notes. They're pushing carts down the hall. They're having nurses round with them to tell them how to build to the highest level. Is that part of what we want to be teaching our medical students? And how about some of the things that Dr. Scherz talked about? I loved Marty McKnight's book, and he talks about several of the problems with the billing games in medicine: price gouging, the markup discount game, predatory billing. So here's an example of a hospital, of a bill. My surgery center that I use, the bill to the patient will state $14,000 for cataract surgery. I negotiated $1,200. Medicare this year will pay $977 for an ambulatory setting, over $1,000 for an inpatient. You know, what's going on with that delta of $13,000? A lot of shenanigans, and we need to fix that. We need to address that, we need to point it out, and we need to fix it. Physicians' reimbursement. Medicare now will pay in 2020 an ophthalmologist doing very, very sophisticated, complicated surgery that carries huge risk. Huge risk. If I blind someone, you talk about medical legal risks, $557. Back in 1996, you received $1,000, and if you do the inflation adjustment, we're getting paid about a third of what we were then, or they are. I've opted out. Here's a patient who sent me his bill. He had a retinal detachment and got a bill from the hospital for $100,000. I sat with my colleagues. This could be done with $5,000. And if you look on here, you'll see funny things like him getting charged for betadine at $1,500 when you can get it for $12. He also was charged, there's errors, $28, 28 hours worth of anesthesia. I don't think so. So you gotta look at your bills. So here's this book. I implore you to read this book. I'm telling you, it will arm you with information that you need to know. We have got to restore trust, the patient-physician relationship, the Hippocratic Oath. We need transparency, competition. We need innovators and disruptors and visionaries like in this room. We need free market medicine. We need to be bold, and we have to expose these games that I mentioned. The kickbacks, the hidden costs, the shakedowns, and they have names, and we really, really, really read this. The second book you have to read was written by Kris Jacobs, a dear friend and great policy guy. And he has analyzed the case against single payer, reading the two bills, Bernie Sanders' bill and the other one in the House. And really, we know this. Medicare for All is a mammoth redistribution scheme. It'll cost $32 trillion in a decade, really double what we're spending each year. People will lose their jobs. People will lose their retirement. It makes private insurance unlawful to go into effect. And really, the joke is Medicare will be gone, because they're going to take that money and put it into a quote-unquote health plan for all the seniors will be at the end of the line. And in there, Kris Jacob points out that doctors and hospitals will be required to do abortions that are tax-funded. It's going to be the beginning and end of right of conscience issues. So what do we need to do? We need to starve and extract all of these middlemen and all these perverse business models and stop feeding the beast. And there are many of them. Look at what we could do. If we got that bloated healthcare system down to what we could do, and I gave our guy a new tattoo there because D for PC has just been great and has done so much. If we had pre-tax direct pay, low-cost, high-deductible plans and catastrophic insurance, I think we'd be cruising along way better. And we know that since, 55 years ago when Medicare and Medicaid were created as safety nets for our poor and needy and as a way to take care of our seniors, they have not stuck to one word of it. We have just seen a crescendo of rapid-fire laws and rules and regulations that have turned us, as we talked earlier, into glorified billers, data collectors, violators of patient privacy, and deniers, rationers, and delayers of care. 2015, When they came out, I was in DC, and I was in a back room. I remember Marcy Zwelling coming out of a room in Pete Sessions' office crying when they said, we're going to do ICD-10. And I said, well, that's it, because I cannot implement and comply with insanity. And I cried the first time in my medical career, and I said, I'm done. I will not do it. I'm walking away. Then to come to find out that they had, Mike Burgess, a Texas representative who's a physician, walked out of the room, and I found out about something called MACRA. And I realized it was all about the coins, not the care, the dollars and cents, not the common sense. On my surgery, on my wall, on my OR, it says, if you don't put down the size of the lesion, they're just going to say it's the smallest and pay you less, which proves it doesn't matter reality. It matters about billing. Are we really at the point where if we document it, we did it, and if we don't document it, we didn't do it? So I went to an ophthalmology meeting, and they said, literally, the government relations person said, well, if you can't beat them, join them. Y'all's problem is you operate too fast. Not enough RVUs, and just do it. Comply. Buy these courses, implement, and comply. And then the AMA, Charles P. Kroll, who's really a forensic accountant, has looked at some of the things that Dr. Edison referred to, and the costs of MOC and what these people make on billing and implementing and just CPT codes. And they make way more money, and this actually tells you how many more millions on an implement and comply industry for us, a test for profits industry, a billing and coding industry. And this has supplanted the best interests of physicians and patients. And if you look at that graph in the bottom, look what has happened at CPT revenue compared to dues revenue at the AMA. The dues revenue over the last 10 years is down like $8 million, whereas the revenue from other sources is up $92 million. Who do you think they're listening to? There is an alternative to implement and comply. You and I are not alone. The voice of Hippocratic medicine has not yet been silenced. And this is my favorite picture, and there I was, and I couldn't believe what was going on. I even drugged my dad up here. Is this for real? My dad's standing behind there, and as so many people in this room that had huge influence on me and my mission in going forward in medicine, we're all, you're on the other side, Meg was on the other side. Use your talents, find your role, and let's all fight together for Team Hippocrates. When I get really upset about something, one time I called Elaina and I said, Elaina, I got it. She has a radio show, she's really gifted with that. I said, can I come on and vent? And she was able to lead me through saying some things because I'm not comfortable with that. It's really outside my zone. One thing that AAPS helped me with is a really great way how to opt out of medicine, because it's the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, and yes, ophthalmology has a lot of primary care components. I have 4 generations of patients, but I'm also a surgical specialist dealing with Medicare patients, and I wanted out of Medicare, and I was able to do that. So October 1st, 2015 was my medical independence day, and I've never looked back. I really think if I had not opted out, I would not be practicing medicine. I completely severed my ties with all third-party, 100%, including Medicare. Every practice is unique, as I am uniquely different from this microscope rep here. But you've got to be creative and be bold. Don't be impressed, be empowered. And we, and everyone in this room, is positioned to help the patients in life-changing ways. Because like we said, they peddle what we provide, and they don't have it. We hold the power. And people say, well, you were able to do this because you live up in the north side or something and you see celebrities. I do see some, but guess what? I'm the person who sees the underinsured, the uninsured, the cab drivers, the people that have no money, the people that are 60 and can't afford premiums or the Affordable Care Act. They come to me. And we must keep this lane of freedom open. I'm lower, my prices are lower than everyone else I know. Huge person in this alternate lane of freedom was Dr. Keith Smith, who I love. And like people in this room, he said, come on, Kris, come up here. I said, you don't know me. I need to know what you're doing, and I want to copy you. He said, come on up. Here's what I'm doing. You can copy me. So unselfish and so brilliant. And then we know what happened with MACRA. Even though I had opted out, I said, it is my duty to read these laws and these rules. So I read the laws and the rules, and it is basically a Trojan horse for the government takeover of medicine. So like Meg and Elaina and Ellen have said, we've got to read and we've got to write. We've got to do op-eds. MACRA to me and the MIPS, the merit-based incentive payment system, is really like China's social scoring system. Government wants to score us as doctors and penalize us or drive our behavior. Is this bribery, coercion? They also want to do social engineering and really score our patients. So one of the new laws, they're going to pay patients or rules. If you do things, you get a bonus. Remember the carrot and the stick? What's happened to us with PQRS and all that? And then the composite performance score. Really grading physicians on a score of 0 to 100 for things that don't mean anything. I wrote a piece called the Scarlet Zero, and I proudly wear it because clearly I have a 0. I've opted out of everything. So the MACRA rule, you know, they write a law, they pass a law, but then the agency has to do all the rules. That's just the rule. And they didn't just take over Medicare, it was commercial insurance. It was not just the MIPS data, it was all the data. It was a total privacy violation and a violation of the Hippocratic Oath. It created multiple levels of intermediaries wasting billions of dollars. Remember when they said it cost $40,000 a year for physicians to do this? And we're collecting meaningless, error-filled data? So MedPAC is the group of 17 people charged with telling Congress what's the state of Medicare and what's going on. They said, forget it. This MIPS thing is unsustainable. It's terrible. They spent $1 billion reporting it in the first year, and when they looked at just 4 specialties, it was $17 billion on our end to report. Imagine if we took that $18 billion in 1 year and spent it on actual patients. Wow. And then what did they do in MIPS? They changed us. We're all physicians. I always tease that my mom could bring me to an appointment and she's a nurse, but she could be a physician. They said eligible clinicians, and if you look here, it's physicians, PAs, nurse practitioners, CRNAs, everyone from a dietitian to an audiologist. And if you read this little rule, it says that they intend to use their authority to expand the definition of a MIPS eligible clinician through future rulemaking in the years. They're going to make everybody is a clinician. Well, they were worried that people wouldn't do this, and so they came up with this thing. You know, CMS has to implement the laws they're given. So they said, pick your pace. They said, just do one thing and you can qualify this year. Well, of course, you know what goes for there. And so Seema Verma, the head of CMS now, has to implement this, and they're huge on ACOs. They are going through this value-based ACO business. Because what's going on? The Affordable Care Act means now for a 60-year-old. And this is Seema Verma's story. A 60-year-old couple living in Grand Island, Nebraska, who earns $70,000 a year, the lowest cost silver plan will cost them $38,000 a year in premiums and $11,000 deductible, more than 2/3 of their income. So do you see why they're going without insurance and why they're coming to me as an out-of-network surgeon and why they need to come to you? I invite you all to set up DPC practices in San Antonio. We need a rheumatologist. I would love to work with all of y'all. We need to make models and forward this with every specialty. They threw money at a problem they didn't fix. So that just said, pretty soon ACOs and participation are going to be mandatory. So patients are suffering, physicians are suffering. I just didn't feel it was ethically tenable to continue anymore. And they can't do this without us. You can't enable them. You're not entrapped, you're empowered. And there is an escape hatch, but we have to blaze new trails. One thing I had to do was I had to write a series of dissents on the MACRA rules over and over and over again, to the point that finally Andy Slavitt invited me to come up to CMS. And my friend Judy Thompson, a general surgeon from San Antonio, went with me. And I called it our Read, Write, Travel, Fight tour. And we did get a few wins. They did exempt a lot of the smaller practices from having to do MIPS and gave us a little bit of an exemption on some privacy. But, you know, MedPAC said repeal it. And what does Congress do? Keep going forward with it. I haven't heard anything about repeal. So this takes time, it takes money, it takes sacrifice, but we have to all do it together. I chose innovation versus implement and comply. And I'm able to offer my patients the latest and greatest technology at less than what Medicare won't cover it, but less than people that are in network and taking everything due. In my world, I'm seeing now third world cataracts that I haven't seen in a long time because people are going without care in San Antonio, Texas. I'm the one not playing, and yet I'm the one taking care of these patients. And I love it. I'm so humbled and blessed to do it. And this group of people, we met up here in DC. This is how we network. Marnie with AID and Dear Marcy, and look at Vanilla Singh, CMS, head medical officer CMS, who led the wonderful pain task force, and my friend Jane Hughes. And of course, Andy Schlafly. We need to work with not just physicians, but also attorneys and our legislators. And I loved this group. And when we went up, there's so many special people in this amazing group. We have to engage and work with moral, virtuous people who love patients and will fight with them. And Lee was there, and many of our friends in this room were at that meeting. So we have to know them. I know my senators, and I escape and hide out in their offices when I'm up there. When I was up there on the MACRA business, I went by, and Senator Cruz was one of 8 to vote against MACRA, because I was able to tell him what was in it. Kat's here, a wonderful DPC Texan. And in Texas, when our Texas chapter of AAPS was fighting MOC, we needed help. And Ori, we can always count on Ori and from Houston. And he helped us because it is all hands on deck, because they try to swoop in the middle of the night and undermine every bit of our effort. Don Buckingham, an ophthalmologist, is a state senator. So we have to use our connections, and we need to run for office. And guess what? Sometimes you have to go to court. So Texas legislature meets every other year, and we've had, year after year, we've had direct patient care legislation, and they will not bring it out of committee to vote like Megs did. So we go up there and we give our testimony, and it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen. And it's very political, and so right now, fortunately, Institute for Justice has taken on our case. Dr. Michael Garrett, an amazing direct patient care doctor in Austin, and I are actually suing the state of Texas, Texas Pharmacy Board and Medical Board. Texas needs in-office dispense, like 45 other states. And I would really appreciate your support on this. This is how we keep our lane of freedom open. That's how patients can come to our office and we can take care of them. And we have really interesting information. If you take the 29 million residents of Texas, the 65,000 doctors, the pharmacy says, well, you can prescribe, you're a doctor, but not within 15, you can dispense, not within 15 miles of a pharmacy. Well, if you circle all the pharmacies, 8 doctors can do it. So you can look at Institute for Justice. Please check out the case and please support us. And I really have to thank Josh Bear at Atlas MD and Phil Eskew with DPC Frontier and the great work. I'm telling you, Reagan said in '85, we're all going to have to pitch in together, but if we refuse, if we go back to the old pattern of business as usual, then let there be no mistake. Business as usual will eventually destroy our prosperity and all the blessings it has given us. And these bold leaders, humble servants and champions of freedom, and innovators and disruptors in this room, and our friends, are there in Texas for me. I mean, they come down, they don't have to, and thank you. This is my state senator, Donna Campbell, who's an ophthalmologist and ER physician, and we're working together, and she called me, and if we can't win this lawsuit, she's going to take the bill back again. And even though TMA had supported a bill with a physician representative and such, we didn't get it through. We need to go from this, government-centered, to this. And this is something that I drew up with my national congressman and his health policy assistant, who I had come to our AAPS meeting because I know her well and I want to know her. And we need to put the patient at the center. And it's as simple as this, sitting down with all the things we know and understand and do it. So when I go to DC and when I'm here, I go see my congressman, Chip Roy, Texas 21, and he actually wrote the Healthcare Freedom Act of 2019. I want you all to look at this, HR 3594. He gets it about DPC. He creates health freedom accounts, and you can use them to buy catastrophic coverage. You can use it to buy premiums, And DPC is not insurance, not like this other stuff that Kim Corbett and everybody's fighting and Kat's fighting. This is the way it should be. So I've got some things in there, but it has 10 co-sponsors. Where's yours? You need to call, meet in person, write, educate, and ask yours why not. And this, only 66 pages. The Republican Study Group came up with a framework for personalized, affordable care. It's great. Read it. I read it on an exercise bike. Voice your support. Where's your congressman? Where was Mike Burgess? Why didn't he sign this? And voice concerns. You know, one thing at AAPS, we read the laws, and we are not happy with what happened with HR 3708, so we write letters. We'll support anyone in this group that we can. It's important to dissent and voice concern. So score, win, don't give in. Let's keep each other up. Let's not get demoralized. Let's empower the states. Let's repeal individual employer mandates. Let's make all healthcare expenses, especially payments for health sharing ministries and DPC and health sharing freedom accounts and all sorts of things, tax exempt for everyone. Let's expand DPC. Let's allow physician ownership of hospitals and surgery centers again. Let's allow physician and in-office dispense so that when my uninsured patient comes in, they can leave with their medication for $5. So we want to promote innovation. We want to primary and replace politicians who do not support personalized care or support Medicare for all. So while I can't endorse politicians, I can go up and to Dallas, which I'm going to some town halls in a couple of weeks, and tell how bad MACRA is and how bad MIPS is and how that person that sponsored that should maybe do a repeal bill, or maybe there's a better one. So just say no to all the other things we've talked about: MOC, national licensure, single payer, replacement by nurse practitioners, midwives, no to prior auth, quantity limits. We can get rid of it and stay vigilant. This was a couple weekends ago at the ranch. Little things sneak up on you with even more venomous. Remember the Alamo. Even though we lost there, it was our battle cry. Defend our patients, profession, liberty, and country. If you're not under fire, you're not in the fight. Let's stay bold and strong and inspired. Let's tackle bad law. Let's tackle medical education and the societies and the boards. Let's fight for our rights, ethics, autonomy, the word I keep hearing. Fight for our patients, the patient-physician relationship, and against the racketeering. Let's deflate that big-bellied balloon. And we have to do lawsuits when necessary. It's uncomfortable. I don't want to do it. I don't want to step out there, but we have to. So I invite you to my hometown. I'd love to see you at the Alamo for the AAPS meeting in San Antonio, especially if you have people that are other than primary care physicians. Here's my version of our come and take it flag. There is the Escalus and Escalapius, I can never say that right. And they're not going to take it from us, guys. And here's how you can contact me. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for everything everybody does.
Hook 'em horns.
Yay, hook 'em.
Are these women firebrands or what? Let's get another round of applause for this panel. So we have 15 minutes to take questions. There are 2 microphones set up. And I'm going to just lead this off, not with a question, but just with a statement. Information is so powerful. And I don't know where you all get your information from. I suppose that many of you were on some of the direct primary care sites. But, you know, Docs for Patient Care website is very, very important, and you should go to that website. We do a weekly radio show called The Doctor's Lounge on americaswebradio.com, and you can listen to it, live podcast, or you can get one of the download podcasts on either iTunes or on the Facebook channel. You can watch it live. You can also get the downloads on the Docs for Patient Care site. But these women who you've heard so much about and it's been so inspiring write a lot. They are very prolific, and they just created a tremendous amount of information, a whole library worth of information that I encourage you to try to access. And I'm going to just go right down the line before we go to questions so that people can write down how you can follow all of these women on all of their social media platforms. And I'll start with Elaina.
My radio show is called Medicine on Call, Living in the Solution, and you can get it on my website, drelainageorge.com, or iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. It runs weekly live on Liberty Talk FM, and it's covering the full gamut from social issues, medicine, the politics of healthcare. We have guests like Dr. Gross, I need to get Dr. Scherz on, and people you've never heard of who need a platform. And it's been a labor of love, and I'd love for you guys to follow me.
You can find me on Twitter at Meg Edison. Super original.
Kris, you got a microphone right there.
Oh, great. Okay.
And her information
Yeah,
is right there.
I've got my information up there. Yeah, so y'all can see.
Okay.
So the platform that I use, and I'm now inspired to agitate a little bit more after hearing these amazing speakers, is Dr. L at McKnight, MD, Ellen.
Thank you. So there's a question right there.
Let me just make a quick comment. I think this is the most important session of all the sessions we're going to have today, because I believe that there's an enormous number of forces that are against us, and unless we are politically active and involved, we're not going to win. And so my question kind of is that you're kind of preaching to the choir here, right? Almost everybody here believes in this, but how are we going to reach the majority of physicians out there who are either apathetic or on the treadmill or frankly fatigued at the end of the day from a long day of work, and they're not involved? If we do not reach a critical mass of doctors, we're going to get run over, and the forces are there. Artificial intelligence is going to replace a lot of our primary physicians. They're going to have extenders with an AI machine, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we get this kind of conversation? Because trust me, I've been practicing a while. I've never heard anything like this at the TMA. I'm in Texas too. I've never heard anything like this at the ACP, okay? But, you know, again, we're the choir. So any suggestions?
Who wants to take that?
I think I'll try to take that. I think it's about the patients, actually. Build it, and they'll come. I'm in Atlanta. I'm around tons of colleagues who do the same thing that I do, but I'm different. We're all different. And patients are actually finding me because they want a different standard of health care. So all we have to do is be excellent, do what we do, love what we do. We will have patients, and when our colleagues see us getting busy, they're going to ask us, you know, what are you doing? You look pretty happy. You're going on vacation. You seem to really love what you're doing. What are you doing? And that's how you get them. You know, you're not going to be able to preach to people who are in the pit, but if they can see the light at the end of the tunnel and actually see a colleague who is feeling good about themselves, I think that feeds on itself. And it's really about the patients. Once they know that they don't have to settle, that they don't have to take what they're given. It's ridiculous, $11,000 on top of $38,000, that statistic is really frightening. They're finding us, they know that their pocketbook is coming into play. All we have to do is be there, be open. When you guys start opening your DPCs, you will be the light for the rest of the community. And they're gonna start looking at you. They may not talk to you, but trust me, your colleagues are looking at what you're doing, and they will start asking when you're not. And I think we're an interesting group as physicians. We like to keep our heads down. We don't like to stick them up. But when we see a trend, people start following it. You guys are the head of this, the movement, as I said before. It's going to take up steam and start rolling, and it's going to steamroll everything, but we just have to start the process.
So I've been to a few meetings where I've spoken to doctors who are not direct primary care doctors about this very thing. The thing that I have highlighted is Number one, I've given examples about direct primary care and the success that it's had. I've also spoken about certain lawsuits and things, the group of doctors who forced a no confidence vote in their CEOs. So you bring some success stories to these physicians. And the main thing that I tell them is, it may not be for you right now, but whatever you do, don't denigrate. Please support these doctors. Don't penalize them in any way for breaking out of the system, because you think it's not for you yet, but in a year or two, there may be another MACRA and MIPS dropped in your lap, and you may decide then that it is for you. So it's just to give examples and then to keep saying it could be for you. Just see how it rolls. I think we can be inspirational, this entire room, for our profession.
And let me just say, there's over 1,000 DPC doctors now. I remember when there were 10. So, this is the beginning of something that is bigger than we can even imagine. And you're right now at the tip of the spear. You are really leading the way. And as things get more and more corporate and people are more and more disengaged, disenfranchised from the traditional medicine, this will become even much more of an option for doctors, and they'll find it. Kat?
So I know you guys well, and you just really inspiring, listening to everything you guys do in your different niches. But actually, this question, it's not really a question, it's kind of something I want Kris to comment on. I know this room is full of innovators and people who kind of want to do things differently, but I also feel that a lot of people in this room like to kind of sit and watch. So I remember being with Kris in Austin, and her saying how one of the anesthesiologists said they cannot work with you because you take so much time off your practice to go to Austin or to go to DC. And I would like you kind of to comment to this group how important it is to do those things. Because it's okay to kind of sit and watch, I get that, but at some point you kind of have to go all in. And Kris takes a ton of time out of her practice to do this. And her suing the state of Texas is actually very brave and a little crazy, but that's how we do it in Texas. But I want you guys to really listen. All of these 4 ladies, how much time it takes to do these things, and you have to stop sitting. You have to actually, like when AAPS and different organizations call for action, you have to act. Because if you don't, things will not change. And then also, if you don't mind, Elaina, if you can talk about how important it is to be autonomous, because that's the only way how we can gain back the healthcare and medicine. So please, Kris, give them kind of a view of your life and what you actually do, because I don't think people understand what kind of sacrifice this is from all of these 4 ladies, because they all have families and have to take time out.
Well, it is sacrifice, and you do get a lot of pushback on the home front at many times. I have 4 daughters, and I've been through periods of time. I remember one vacation where every night I stayed up and did not sleep and read the Affordable Care Act. And so it's not easy. It takes a lot of time. You lose sleep, you lose money, you lose travel, but it's a calling. I think medical school wasn't easy. Residency and internship wasn't easy. And anything worth fighting for is not easy. So I think we just have to do it. But what does make it easy, Kat, is like when you come. And we just met another person from Texas who's connected with the TMA. We can grow our group, we can grow our network, we can work together. And that makes it easier, because if I can't be there, we were supposed to have that meeting, a meeting a couple weeks ago. I was on a plane, the plane didn't take off. But guess what? I had some other people there that were going. Nikki Johnson was going, and Kat, I think you went. So we have to have each other's backs. We have to be together as this movement grows. And it is a movement, it is innovative, and it doesn't take many to make it grow. I did lose my anesthesiologist. I had 2 my whole surgical career, and he just, basically went with somebody who took a big Medicaid contract. But guess what? I found a new one that's incredible. I love him. He gets it. He came from Puerto Rico. He's brilliant. Trained here. Love him. He's growing with the movement. And I pay my anesthesiologist on a direct patient care. I think I pay him about what they get for 3 or 4 cases.
Well,
Yeah. So they probably in the shabbiest gig in town. And, he's willing to work maybe 2 to 3 days a month with me instead of 4,
but the takeaway, I want people to not feel that they have to emulate you, because you are really unbelievable. People can do just one thing, and that will make a difference. And I want everybody to realize that Kris didn't start out doing everything she's doing right now. She started out doing one thing, and every journey takes one giant step. Next question.
Hi, I just got elected as the president-elect for our county medical society. So when Meg, you were, and it was kind of the last person to step back. Is kind of how it was, but. So Meg, that was really inspiring when I was listening to your presentation. I was just curious as to know what were some of the first things you took through the medical society, and some of those delegates, the spots that you did, and how did you do that?
For me, the first thing, it was MOC, and it was actually pretty easy because that's something that like 99% of doctors are going to agree with me on, and it was a great topic to work on. It was actually I'd never done anything in a medical society, never written a resolution, and there were doctors from all over the country who were helping me out, where they had passed resolutions through their House of Delegates, and I'm like, can you give me the language? And they gave me the language, and I tweaked it for my state. But it really was, again, physicians helping me out, because I didn't know any of this stuff. But MOC was the first thing I started with. It was pretty much a no-brainer, pretty easy to get through the medical society.
And do you want to just tell the strategy that you used, which was right to work?
Yeah, that was interesting. Michigan had just become a right to work state, and I had actually worked on that project as well. A UAW worker had needed, he was getting involved in making Michigan a right to work state. It was actually largely led by union workers who wanted the right to be able to choose a union or not. And I helped them out, and Michigan, against all odds, became a right-to-work state. And it was so many parallels between what was going on with that and with MOC. Same story. You should have the right to choose what CME you're going to use to, increase your education. You shouldn't have to buy the CME from one particular company. And so that was really, in Michigan, it kind of came out as pretty similar to the right to work issue. It was pretty cool. Pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. Rip?
I just wanted to thank Meg as well. And it's kind of surprising when I met you a couple years ago that you've ended up advocating for medical societies. Which is, you got it. You understand. It's going to be hard to emulate Kris. If you guys have it in you, do it. But what can you do? There's 700,000 physicians in America. There's only about 25% who even feel they have ownership in their practice anymore. And there's such a difference between practicing physicians and physician practice. In this room, you people all have a practice. You have people you relate to, people you have a covenant with. But so many of our doctors have moved into employment, and the physicians who move into employment rarely have the desire, ability, or understanding that they need to belong to anything, because they belong to their employer, and that's who governs them, and that's who guides them. But the medical societies have been around for centuries. They are a mechanism that is ripe for people, for physicians who actually care. And I so much agree with you, Meg. We need to it wouldn't be like infiltrate. They just need our leadership. They need good physician leaders who understand the sanctity of the physician-patient relationship. So I so much agree with you Be joiners of these medical societies. Be leaders in them. Become active in your state medical society. Use them as your mechanism. They have the way to get into the legislators. It isn't the Kris Held mentality where you have to storm up there. You need somebody to kind of open the door for you, maybe, whatever you want. But Meg, you're so right, and I so appreciate that, because I also have been just kind of PO'd at the AMA and everything else. But you really can influence those organizations. So get in and fight, guys. Get in and fight. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Kim?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thank you, ladies. I can say that I'm honored to have worked with most of them, and you couldn't have put together a better female panel up there. I'm actually listening to a call right now that's live from the White House. They're releasing the transparency rule today. Get your popcorn, this is going to be fun to watch. They literally are going to be releasing the rule to disclose on a public website negotiated rates for in-network providers and allowed amounts paid for out-of-network providers. This is one part of it. This is a huge transparency rule that's being released, and I can say, like, direct primary care, you know, we don't play a part in that, but we are transparency. So the government knows, insurers know that we have to be transparent with patients. What we're doing is providing a shoppable expense or for people to use their own healthcare dollars for. But one of the other things that these ladies represent that direct primary care is doing, there's so many other issues that we all overlap. We overlap with all the advocacy efforts. And I've said this all along. Maintenance of certification, there's a lot of direct primary care doctors who are leaving their their usual board certifying agencies and going to MBOMS, where you don't have to do mock. As far as HIPAA, and I'll be talking about HIPAA tomorrow, there's a huge part in HIPAA that we don't really push too hard, and it's the right to restrict the release of private health information if you're paying cash. Patients have the right to do that. As far as MIPS and MACRA, well, that's a no-brainer. We don't do that as direct primary care. CON law. Through our transparency and our driving down costs, and that data is going to start coming out soon, they're going to see that physician-run organizations and physician-run offices, small practices, the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, what Kris does in the OR, what Elaina does in the OR and in her office as specialist, and Ellen and even Meg as a pediatrician. You know, when they're physician-run, we can lower prices on our own. So CON law will probably start taking care of itself pretty soon. Doesn't mean we have to stop fighting, though. So as far as the value-based stuff, it's interesting to me that CMS rolled out another value-based option, or trying to call it direct primary care when it's the farthest thing from that. JAMA just released an article on October 9th. I tweeted about it. They're saying that there's a huge value-based disappointment. It's time for a fresh approach, but you know, they're still trying to call it value-based. Well, what we do is value-based based on the patient and what they want to pay, what they're willing to pay. If I charge too much and they don't find me valuable, they're going to go find another DPC doctor. So do you see all of this overlaps, and all of our advocacy efforts, when you put it all together and you stir it together and you make a good, you know, pie out of the whole thing, we're all helping each other. So as you get involved, just know that what you do isn't just about direct primary care. It is, but it isn't. It all overlaps, and that's why we all have to have each other's backs, and I appreciate these ladies being here today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We're over right now. I'm sorry, Rory. So.